Okay, as part of taking the rear wheel off, I've had a look at the rear brake caliper, and it's obvious that the caliper is partially seized. There's a piston in either side of the caliper, and the piston on this side is working, and the piston on this side is seized. If you look at the brake shoes, brake pads, you can see there's virtually nothing left on this pad on the left. That's because that piston is working. The reason it's in at the moment is because I forced it back with a view to getting the disc back in before I realised what was happening. So that piston is coming out, but the piston on this side is clearly not coming out. It's not moving, and so it's only the caliper is literally only half as efficient as it should be, and that's why it's worn that brake pad away. So I'm going to have to take this. We're going to replace the brake cylinder, the brake caliper, and I think the one I'm getting has got a different thread. Well, you know, it's never simple, is it? Why is it nothing ever simple? So it's got a different thread. So that means I think I'm going to have to replace the brake pipe, the metal brake pipe, and the flexible hose. And so I think the new pipe will go straight from the, instead of, it'll go from the back of the caliper, it'll just be a single pipe rather than a fixed pipe and a flexible pipe. So I've got to take all that off now, which is basically just undoing these two nuts, which are done up very tight, and then taking off the brake hose, and then we'll get the new caliper, bolt that on. And then the worst thing about it is we're going to have to re-bleed it all and everything, and they can be a bit of a pain to bleed. We'll see how we get on. Obviously, we've got new brake pads coming, but that's something I've discovered just from taking the rear wheel off. I wouldn't have noticed it otherwise, unless I checked the brake pads. That obviously it's seized on one side. Now you could spend some time and try and free up that. If you wanted to, you could free up that piston, but in the scheme of things, I think it's just easier to fit a new caliper in this case. Although we're going to have to replace the brake pipe and brake hose as well. Okay, first thing we're going to do is to take I'm going to take the caliper off the torque arm to begin with. And then I'm going to take the hose off, and then I'm going to take the torque arm off so that I can put the new caliper on later on. So I'm just locking the nut on the back. Okay, I've got my Mega Blaster. I'll get the nut out. There it goes. Okay. Doesn't want to come out. Come on. Honestly, I wonder sometimes, I do. Okay, that's the caliper off the torque arm. And now I'm going to take the torque arm off there's a torque locking arm, and I'm going to take the torque arm. Well, what I want to do is I want to get the torque arm off so I can get the hose off. because don't forget I've got to change the hose on this bike. Yeah, I need to get the hose off because the Triumph caliper that we're going to put on has a different thread, so we can't use the existing hoses, so we're going to have to replace these two hoses with one long hose. Right, we've got the caliper off there, and now I'm just going to undo the hose here from the master cylinder because all that's coming off. We'll have to put the torque arm will just go back on, but without the pipe going through it. So the bolt will go back into it, because obviously we need a torque arm to mount the caliper. And the I don't know if you can see, but the torque arm is then mounted at the front on a let's see if I can get a picture of this. Yeah, so on this sort of torque arm retaining strap, and that is deliberately not tight so that when you adjust the wheel, adjust the chain, then the whole thing can come back. Because it's, if that was solid, then when you adjusted the rear wheel, it couldn't move back. So that torque arm adjuster is there so that the whole caliper can come back with the rear wheel, but still remain locked. Because if it wasn't locked, then when you put the brake on, then the caliper would go round with the disc. So it needs to be locked. So it's like it's a version of a brake stay on a drum brake. But in this case, they've made this so it moves, so that you don't have to undo that and move it back. It moves back by itself. Okay, so we're getting ready to fit the rear wheel now, because the new sprocket is in. Clean the wheel up a bit, fine. And now we have the new caliper in the rear torque arm, which is, it's one of those jobs. I'll tell you about it. So I thought I won't put it on camera because it's only bolting it in, but as ever. So this is the old caliper, and as you can see, this pad on the right virtually worn away, because this piston was working. This piston on this side is completely seized in the housing, so it wasn't doing anything. So you can see all the wear was on that pad. So that's how we know it's seized. And you can see that it's absolutely rusted in that piston. Okay, so all right, just get a new one, put it in. But of course, this one is metric. So therefore, we have to have a different hose, because that's metric. But then it's going, on to the master cylinder, so there has to have an adapter on the master cylinder, a little screw adapter on there, and then we have to put a screw adapter into the caliper. Okay, but then I realised that there's 4 holes in this caliper, and they've got these little plugs in. Well, the holes were in the wrong place. The plugs were in the wrong place, so I had to take those out, which were done up to, I don't know, sort of 150 pounds torque or something. They were ridiculous to move. So, and what I thought was probably best to have the pipe going in this one, and then the bleed coming out in the opposite corner. Although, of course, that's going to be difficult, because when it's on the bike, it's going to go that way up, which means the bleed is at the bottom, where we really want it at the top. Notoriously difficult to bleed these calipers, and we'll have the joy of coming to that later on. Anyway, yeah, bolted it on okay, fitted okay on the torque arm. Then I put the pads in, the new pads. Just by the by, while I remember, I always put a little bit of grease on the back of the pads. Just helps to stop them squealing. Anyway, I put them in. Then I put the the pins in. These pins to hold pads in, which is actually these. They came with the caliper, but they're actually too big, so they wouldn't actually go through the little hole in the brake pads. They only just go through the caliper. So, but anyway, I persevered stupidly and finally got them in. But then, of course, the brake pads wouldn't move. They were so tight, the brake pads were seized on the split pin. So, like, there's no way the brake was going to work properly. So then I had to fight them back off again, get some of my own pins, which are, just that little fraction smaller. They slide in perfectly. They hold the pads, and we're sorted. But it's a little job like that. I thought, just put a new caliper on, and then you got to change these round. You've got to mess about with the pins. It's all metric, and to me. So it's one of those. Anyway, we're finally there, and and I thought, is it easier to put the pads in before or maybe should I put the pads in after? No, definitely put the pads in first, especially on this caliper. I don't know if it's the same with this one, but I realised the pads can only actually go in one way from the top. So, with the wheel in situ, you wouldn't be able to put them in, or at least it'd be exceptionally difficult. I don't think you could get them in. No, you have to take half the wheel off again to get them in. So I've checked that there's enough gap. The pistons are fully open, and there is enough gap for the to get the disc in between the brake pads. And right, okay. And the next thing I'm worried about, of course, is I've got to put this on, and do it up tight, but without it twisting. So hopefully that will be okay, because these are the nuts on the end are independent. They will turn without turning the pipe. So hopefully that'll be okay. I'm going to connect this. First of all, I'm going to put this back on the swinging arm, on the little torque arm stay here. Okay, which, as I said before, it's not supposed to be tight. The nut should be tight, but it shouldn't hold the torque stay, so that you can adjust the back wheel without undoing anything. Okay, so I'll put that on, and then when that's on, then we'll have a go at getting the wheel back in, putting a new chain on, and connecting up the hose. We can't bleed, thankfully, yet, because I know it's going to be a nightmare, but we need to get the brake pedal on and everything. So, but these are always a nightmare to bleed, and so we'll have that joy coming later on. Okay, there we go.